My name is Kitty McGowan. I'm the president of the U.S. Super Yacht Association. I'd like to welcome our members that I see that are out there and a lot of guests that are here with us today. And I know we're back here at Groundhog Day. I mean, we thought a year, 18 months ago that by now we'd be way past it and moving on to something else more fun, because it has been a crazy year. And we were just seeming to get back to reality and get back to life. And here we go again. So as is our practice with U.S. Super Yacht Association, we feel it's very important to make sure, as all of our webinars that we did for you guys last year, to hit on those key targets and things that make it easier to run your business, protect yourselves and your employees as well. And Lindsay Massillon is not a stranger to us for sure. She joined us last year for a webinar and has done some other great things for us. So I think you guys are going to truly enjoy this program, because there's a lot of mystery on what you can and cannot do in these uncertain times. And we wanted to make sure that everybody had the most up-to-date things that are happening out there. Understanding this very, very important factor is that we know that every day it's changing. I mean, just this week, we know the FDA cleared the Pfizer vaccine, and how is that going to impact us? Lindsay's going to tell us that in just a few minutes. So let me just do a quick intro for Lindsay, not Lizzie. Lindsay is a shareholder at Fowler White Burnett. She is a Juris Doctor and has it from Nova Southeastern University and Shepherd Broad College of Law. She also went to Rutgers University, is a multi-published author of many, many articles, and has many awards and has been making presentations all over the country. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time introducing this obviously fabulous female. Let's get right to the program, and thank you again all for coming. And Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us. And she has a brief presentation, so we're gonna let you go ahead and share your screen and let's get started.
All right, thank you, Kitty, so much for that very warm welcome. I appreciate it. As Kitty said, yes, my name is Lindsay Massillon. I kind of specialize in labor and employment, and of course, that's why I'm here today. Let's get started here. All right. So obviously we're here for legal advice for our employers during this time frame. And let me get right into it. So what are the 5 questions that we are going to talk about today? First, can I legally require my employees to get vaccinated? What about HIPAA and the ADA? There are a lot of misconceptions about what HIPAA is. A lot of people think it's one thing and think it applies to certain people. And it may not. Can I require my employees to return to the office? That's a question I've been getting a lot. And really, I try to cull these questions from what I'm hearing from my own clients. So hopefully some of these questions you all share. I'm sure that there are 1,000 other questions. I would love to address every single thing, but as Kitty said, you know, this is a really changing landscape, and my answer to one question one day may change later on. So that's something really important for employers to just kind of keep abreast of everything. And I'll try to reiterate that as we go along. Are there any risks to requiring or not requiring the vaccination? That's a common question. And what can I legally do if my employees do not want to return to work or do not want to get vaccinated? So those are the main questions we're going to hit on. There might be some other sub questions that we'll touch on, but that's the bulk of it. So starting with the big question that I'm getting, and hopefully one of the first questions that you all likely have is, can I require vaccines of my employees? Again, short answer, yes, you can. The EEOC came out with guidance around May of this year, indicating very clearly that employers actually can require their employees as a condition of employment to get the vaccine. A lot of people are surprised to hear that. Certainly a lot of my friends, colleagues, even other attorneys were surprised that that was legal. It definitely is. There are some exceptions. We're going to talk about them a little bit later on. But those 2 primary exceptions are if a person has a disability under the ADA, and if they have a sincerely held religious belief under Title VII. And a key comment with those two laws are federal laws. and they only apply to employers with 15 or more employees. So that may be a lot of you, but if you have fewer than 15 employees, you are not covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, or Title VII. And Title VII, by the way, is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and that prohibits employers from discriminating on the basis of sex, race, color, religion, national origin, and I think that's it.
So can I ask you very quickly, so then, because that does apply to a lot of our employers in this industry. We have a lot of small mom and pop type businesses. So if we're not covered under that, how does that impact us?
Great question. So if you are in Florida, it's the same thing, it's 15 or more. However, if you operate in Broward County, West Palm Beach, or Palm Beach County, Miami-Dade County, there are, and several other counties, although I'll tell you, I'm not well versed on those counties and what their ordinances are, but many counties do have their own ordinances that prohibit employers from discrimination on those same basis, including disability, with 5 or more employees. So it's a key point. Again, I can tell you for Miami-Dade County, Broward County, Palm Beach County, they all have ordinances that apply to employers with 5 or more employees. So if you're in between, if you have fewer than 5, odds are, and again, I can't speak for sure about the other counties, but I can say with decent confidence that you're not covered by the laws. So I guess technically anything goes, although that's certainly something that I would still recommend that if you're fewer than 5 employees, that you still are being mindful of the impact of that. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question. So it may still apply to you. There are different, and that's a whole nother topic probably for another day. There are different procedures when you're dealing with a violation of a county ordinance versus a federal law, as you can imagine. But still you want to be mindful that the law may still apply to you. I pulled out, again, the EEOC guidance that I referenced, and I think we are distributing this PowerPoint. It is hyperlinked, and I've included the links to, at the end, the specific sources that I'll be talking about. But this is great guidance, the EEOC guidance. It's not a lot of legalese, and hopefully I'm not spewing legalese to you today, and I'm talking person to person, attorney to business owner. But the way that the guidance is written is very user-friendly. It's written in a way that I think generally employers can understand. It's a question and answer type format. So it's a really great resource. If you have some general questions, because your answers may be in there, and again, that's coming directly from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. What I've been advising my clients, they'll come to me and say, hey, Lindsay, can I require this? So again, yes, you can, but you may want to consider encouraging vaccinations kind of as more of a softball approach. What does that look like? It could mean, that you're disseminating some of the recent information that is out there about vaccinations. Maybe you're taking some information from the Center for Disease Control website. The CDC has a bunch of different infographics and fact sheets that, again, are user-friendly, keeping your employees kind of abreast of these developments. Hey, the FDA approved the Pfizer vaccine. Maybe Moderna is down the line. Of course, still keeping to our other procedures and the other steps that we've been taking this whole time, wearing the masks, washing hands, and encouraging all of that as well. So you can encourage. There's also an ability to provide incentives. I know some companies have provided, and this is legal, you can do this, whether it's a monetary, something small, maybe $50, $100 for employees who decide to get the vaccine. You absolutely can do that. The EEOC has said that you can offer incentives as long as they are not coercive. So again, kind of small gift cards, monetary kind of rewards. Another option I've seen is, allowing your employees some paid time off to get the vaccine. Also being flexible if they suffer from any side effects from the vaccine, in terms of maybe providing some paid leave in addition to your regular PTO policy. There's a lot of different things you can do. These are not requirements, and that's certainly a conversation with your leadership about what makes sense for your company. But those are just some options that I've heard of. I've also heard of one company where they're not requiring vaccines, but if an individual contracts COVID and they were not vaccinated, that employer has decided not to provide paid time off, because you don't have to provide paid leave for someone who has contracted COVID-19 or is suffering from those symptoms. That law expired last year, so there's no requirement for that, but some employers as a choice have continued to do that. But as I said, in this particular instance, they're only doing that for those employees who got vaccines. So again, an option. So moving on to our next question, a big one where there's, I think, a lot of misconceptions. What about HIPAA and the ADA? So I've heard a lot of people say, well, my employer can't ask me if I'm vaccinated. That's a HIPAA violation. Probably not. And here's why. HIPAA only covers, there's only certain covered entities. What are those? Health plans, so your typical insurance plans. Healthcare clearinghouse, honestly, I don't 100% know what that means, but it's probably not your business. And a healthcare provider, that's really simple. That's your clinics, your doctors, your healthcare, your direct healthcare providers. So that means that your doctor cannot disseminate your healthcare information without your consent. However, an employer asking an employee, are you vaccinated? That is not a HIPAA violation. So you can rest assured that if you do decide whether you're making it mandatory or not, if it's still something that you'd like to know, because we'll talk about some things later on, you can ask that question. You can, as an employer, ask your employee for proof of vaccination. The key thing, which is the next point, is ADA considerations confidentiality. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, which again applies to 15 or more employers with 15 or more employees, you have to maintain that medical information in confidence and separate and apart from your personnel file. So generally, I'm sure everybody has their personnel file for John Doe and John Smith and Jane Smith. If you are asking for any type of medical information or for a copy of their vaccination card, you can do so. Make a copy, but put it in a separate folder that would be apart from their regular personnel file that has maybe their payroll records and their disciplinary actions and things like that. So as long as you're keeping that in confidence, you're not in violation of the ADA, and again, you're not in violation of HIPAA. I will say that there is a little asterisk. It doesn't apply to employers and employees, but as many of you know, if you're here in Florida, you know that we had an executive order which then translated into legislation from Governor DeSantis, which says that you cannot ask your patrons and customers for proof of vaccination. That does not apply to employers asking their employees. So if an employee, again, if you decide to ask that question and your employee says, oh, well, there's this legislation that says you can't ask me that, you can under that executive order and legislation, because it only applies to your customers. So just want to throw that out there because it is something that I've heard from my clients.
That's in Florida. It doesn't necessarily apply to every state.
Correct.
Right. So
No,
I know we have some people here from other states. And so, because there are other rules and other laws being enacted in other states, just.
Correct. Yeah. So, and I know generally about, so primarily I'm focused on federal law, which is going to be applicable to everyone here. Of course, I'm a Florida attorney, so it's easier for me. I feel more comfortable speaking about that, but certainly if they're, keep in mind, and I'll make it very clear when I'm talking about something Florida versus federal. But yes, Kitty, you're exactly right that is purely a Florida law. There are, as we know, different mandates in different states, different cities, even on the city level. So
yeah, you can't go into a restaurant in New York or New Orleans now without a card. So
right. So just because something is not happening maybe in Florida or not happening in a certain city or state, if you are operating out of other states and other locations, either, you know, it's something that I can talk about kind of more on a one-on-one type basis, or definitely talk to an employment lawyer who's barred in that state and can give you specific state advice. So those are the key points for those two kind of issues. Oh, what I was going to say is when it comes to the ADA, you know, again, you can ask for whether you're vaccinated or not. You can ask for the proof of vaccination. If you're going to go into other question as to, well, why didn't you get vaccinated? Things like that, that's where you're going to start needing to be a little bit more wary, because additional questions may elicit information about a disability, an underlying medical condition. And it's not to say that you can't ask those questions. We're going to get into that shortly, but just tread lightly. And again, consult an attorney if you feel like you have some specific questions about what, you know, really specific about what you can and can't ask. Can you require your employees to return to the office? So that's obviously another big question, especially now because we have a spike pretty much everywhere. But some companies were looking at, if they were on a remote work schedule, they were looking at transitioning back. You absolutely can require your employees to come back to work. The biggest caveat to that is going to be the ADA. So under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, if someone is disabled, and that's really specifically defined, it's not just that they're getting Social Security disability, and it may not be commonly what you think of disabled. It's obviously the law is very clear about what it defines, or I won't say it's very clear. There is a specific definition in the ADA about what that is. And again, that's a discussion of kind of on a case-by-case basis about whether that person actually is disabled or not. But if they are, and they are asking for an accommodation, they're saying, hey, you know, I can't return to work, or maybe they're just saying I don't want to. You would be obligated as an employer to provide a reasonable accommodation to that person. So what could that look like? You know, if their job is able to be performed from home and they're able to, and you've kind of already made the determination that this person does have some medical condition that would qualify as a disability under this law, you know, perhaps you allow them to work from home a little bit longer. So the ADA, the accommodation is really an exception to your general rule. So you may have a general rule or policy, but you're making an exception for that person because of that reason.
But I mean, what if I have these people that have gotten just real comfy staying home in their yoga pants, and they just like being able to do laundry and still do their job. And it's just an emotional thing where I'm like, oh my God, I'm so terrified I can't go back to work. I mean, really, at some point, as an employer, can you just say, yes, you got to show back up, or you're terminated?
Yeah, awesome question. You can, you know, and so you said something interesting. I think you said, you know, I'm kind of like freaked out. Or, you know,
I hear that a lot, because I have people, they're like, I'm panicked about going back to work. Now, panic, is there real panic, or is it just because I've gotten real comfy in my yoga pants?
Yeah, and that's people throw words around like panic and I'm freaked out and I have anxiety, and they may have a medical diagnosis of panic attacks and anxiety. That would be within the ADA. So there may need to be some other questions that we may need to ask to dive deeper. And that was my little caveat with before, that you can ask some of these questions if we're trying to find out, okay, are you freaked out because you're really not looking forward to it, to you know, you liked walking around in your pajamas, and maybe that's even being generous. Maybe you were, who knows what you were doing. You know, being able to take out your dog and, I don't know, take a little siesta, a little nap in the middle of the day. Yeah, you know, as an employer, you can, and again, it's on a need to know basis. So we're going to keep it kind of like, you know, whether it's your HR director or the direct manager, okay, what's really going on? Why are you freaked out? And maybe it is a question of, okay, do you have a medical note? And you can ask, you absolutely can. ask for medical documentation to support their request. So you don't need to take them at their word. I mean, especially when we're dealing, I think, with a mental disability or mental illness, just because it's not something that we can see. You can see if someone has a broken arm, broken leg. You may even know if someone has diabetes because they're taking insulin. So there's some things we can see and some things we can't. So you can ask those questions. But if they're just saying, well, no, I don't have a diagnosis, I just don't want to be here. You can say, well, then I'm sorry, then this may not be a good fit for you any longer, and you can make that decision to terminate employment. Once you've ruled out that it really is just their personal preference to work from home, which again, who may not want to work from home? A lot of people do and have gotten used to it. But you can say, enough is enough, and maybe you give them some time because you want to be flexible. But then you say, hey, there's a hard deadline, September 1st. If you're not back in the office, without a reason like what I stated, and really that's the only exception for something like that is if they qualify for that, you can make that decision.
Can I throw one more part in here? Because I know we're starting to get some questions back up on the other side. But if you as an employer have mandated vaccinations for your office, for your employees, and I'm working from home, and now I choose I do not want to get vaccinated, so that is the reason I can't or I don't want to return to work, can you mandate them to also get vaccinated working from home, or is that a way to also terminate if they won't come because, and it's not necessarily because of religious reasons or those other reasons that you stated earlier, but I just don't want to get the vaccine? Can you terminate for that reason as well? Or, I mean, I understand the ADA side and those other things, but is that a reason that you could terminate?
Yes. So if it's not because of a disability, and it's not because of a sincerely held religious belief, it's just purely, I don't trust it, I don't want to. And you've made it a mandatory requirement for the job, you can terminate. There's nothing else you need to do. You can say, well, this is a condition of your employment. Just like maybe some of us have non-compete agreements that you may ask your employees to sign either when they're onboarded or at some other point. You say, well, you sign this agreement or you won't be onboarded. That's valid. You can absolutely do that and say vaccination is a requirement of this job. Especially when you're being you're not singling out a certain group of people and saying only they need to be vaccinated. Well, unless you have kind of a reasonable basis for doing that. Maybe you have a front of the house, back of the house situation, and maybe that's fine. But barring something like that, yes, absolutely, you can terminate employment.
Now, is this something that you have to update in your employee manuals and such and have them actually sign off on it to be part of that covering yourself?
That's certainly an option. It's not a requirement, but just like any policy, it's always good if you're going to actually have a policy that you're going to enforce, to have that in your handbook, whether it's an addendum. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to overhaul your whole handbook, but if you wanted to add on and have them all sign that they understand that this is a requirement of their position, absolutely it can't hurt to do something like that. Right now, there is no law that makes vaccination status, well, no federal law that makes vaccination status a protected class. So if somebody says, well, you're discriminating against me because I'm vaccinated or I'm not vaccinated. Yeah, technically you are discriminating against them because you're treating them one way versus another, but it's not illegal discrimination. You absolutely can make that line in the sand. I will say that Montana has made it, so just in the state of Montana, has made it a protected class, and they've prohibited discrimination by employers for people who are based on vaccination status. Again, that's just Montana. There are, I believe, some other states, I want to say Kentucky, that have this kind of in their legislation. It's not a law yet, but at the federal level, I don't see that happening. Could it happen in Florida? I think it could be possible. New York, I don't think so. Again, kind of more so along, looking at your party affiliation and kind of where your state is. I think that could be an indicator for whether that law, but it would only be a state law. It wouldn't be at the federal level. So I just want to throw that out there because, again, like we said at the beginning, things are changing. And that could be something that comes down the pike, but as it stands right now, you absolutely can terminate employment because of that.
Okay, sorry.
So, are there any risks to requiring or not requiring the vaccine? The answer is yes, there's risk kind of either way. Some employers have asked me, well, if I make it a requirement that my employees get vaccinated and they suffer side effects from the vaccination, am I liable? Yes, but it would be under workers' comp, or I guess the answer is possibly, but it would be under your workers' compensation plan. So any type of employee illness, if it can be attributed to the employer, and I would say that if your employer is requiring as not just the encouraging, so maybe you're on the encouraging side and your employee chooses to take the vaccine and it gets side effects, I don't see that being a workers' comp issue. But if you are requiring it as a condition of employment and there is illness side effects, something like that, again, that would travel under your workers' comp. That's the only remedy for an employee. So they can't also file like negligent action against you or something else. It would just be a workers' comp claim. So that is possible. You can talk to your workers' comp carrier. I know kind of generally about workers' comp because obviously there's an intersection with what I do, but there are specific workers' compensation attorneys. And of course, your carrier would be a great resource if you want to dive into more of that. The FDA approval for Pfizer, what does that mean? Obviously, we know that just happened on Monday.
Can I ask you very quickly, going back to workers' comp, if you have an unvaccinated employee and you don't have mandates for vaccinations and it's a public kind of facing job, if for some reason I contract COVID and I'm saying I got it at work, would that be considered something that's a workers' comp type question?
Yes, most likely. And again, your carrier may have more information on that, but I would say yes, because one of the things with workers' comp, just as a general rule, is that if it was directly related or caused by something at work, so if they contracted it and were able to trace it back.
Yeah, but that's pretty tough to do.
It is difficult to do. Yeah, and that's why the contact tracing, I mean, you're going to ask those questions. And it may be a judgment call about whether or not you say, hey, yeah, this sounds like it might be a workers' comp issue, and you decide to alert your carrier. The other caveat with that is also OSHA. There are OSHA reporting requirements where if you have somebody who's been ill, and it's not just seriously ill, I think if they contracted COVID and it can be, again, traced back to the place of employment, then I believe even under OSHA, there are certain forms, and again, I'm not 100% on OSHA just because it's
OSHA's massive anyway. It's
massive and there's so much. But there's a particular form where you have to indicate your injuries, any injuries that you have, and I believe that has to be reported. And again, at the end of this, I have links back to OSHA, and they talk about this, and they can, again, there's so much information. So I'm trying to touch on what you might want to think about, but just know that we're not doing deep dives into some of these things. So the FDA approval right now, it doesn't really change any of the laws. There's no mandate. Certainly, President Biden is encouraging, because of this approval, that more and more companies and employers do make it mandatory. But it is not a requirement right now. There's no law that says it has to be mandatory from businesses. Again, that may change either at the city, state, or not yet, right? Certain cities, again, are already starting to require that. A lot of major companies, I think Chevron was one of them. I know that there were a number of companies before that were making it mandatory, but as of Monday, a number of I know that the Pentagon said, okay, that they were kind of waiting for approval. And so that was something that they said, okay, now that we have that, it is mandatory. So you may see more and more of that, but as far as whether there's a law about it, as of right now, the approval has not changed anything law-wise. And I already talked about OSHA considerations. The other thing is too, you know, if you don't require the vaccine, could an employee say, well, you've created an unsafe work environment? And I point that out because under OSHA, there's something called a general duty clause. And it says that all employers, whether you have 1 employee or 1 million employees, that you have to ensure a place of employment free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause physical harm or death. COVID-19, as we know, could cause physical harm or death. So could an employee make a claim to OSHA and say, you know what, my employer is not creating a safe environment? Possibly, it's a consideration. However, are we also doing other things? So if we're choosing not to make it mandatory, are we still requiring masks? You know, what, and every workplace is different. Some workplaces, open concept, maybe not a lot of people in the office. Maybe we're all spread out. Okay, so is there a high likelihood of serious injury or death in that type of situation if we're wearing masks? You know, we're cleaning, we're disinfecting, we're doing all the things that we've been doing for a year and a half.
Forever.
So, consideration, forever. Right. Washing our hands, I mean, hopefully we've all been washing our hands forever.
We learned that in kindergarten, right?
Yeah, we hope so. So, you know, it's just something to be, you know, to think about. I'm not saying that should persuade you either way. Again, I see that as being a potential, but that honestly, you can have people on both sides complaining that it's not fair. So I think just as your employer, you know your workplace best, and it's certainly a conversation with an employment lawyer, but you're gonna know what your workplace, you know, what works for your workplace and for your work culture. And as long as you're making the informed decision about it, you know, again, that's what I'm here to do today, hopefully. We already kind of talked about some of this, but what can I legally do if my employee doesn't want to return to work and doesn't want to get the vaccine? So I think we touched on the return to work aspect. You know, just purely saying that you don't wanna, it's not gonna pass muster. That's not gonna be something that, you know, we just say, oh, okay, well, that's fine. No, if it's really something that we need them in the office, you ask the questions. Why don't you want to come in? And then we can go down that rabbit hole depending on what the answer is. And we can maybe find some other thing that works for them. Maybe they come in the office at different hours of the day. Maybe they sit in a different location. Maybe they were the receptionist, but we can move them to the back. So there are other things that maybe we can do. Again, if they qualify for an accommodation. I'm not saying you give an accommodation or you're flexible with everybody. Sometimes,
and especially right now, because it's such a tight labor market at this point, I know that a lot of employers are kind of faced with not wanting to terminate somebody because to try and get somebody with a pulse that can actually occasionally do a job is not always easy these days. So so that's where you're saying the accommodation and trying to be flexible with people is more likely going to be the course of action that people are going to want to try and take without putting everybody else at risk too. So
yeah, it's tough, and I would love to say here's exactly what you need to do 110% of the time, but probably that's not really what we all want to hear, maybe necessarily anyway. But there are considerations too when we're when we're thinking about what's reasonable. You know, also some businesses are still kind of reeling from just financially. And is that a consideration? And I can tell you the EUC says absolutely that is a consideration. So if there were things that maybe we could have done 2 years ago for that person, but we can't do now because of things changing financially, that counts. That is something. We didn't talk too much about the religious exception. I do want to touch on that a little bit. So that would be for the vaccination, not for return to work. I haven't seen anybody claim religious exemption for returning to work. But, you know, could someone say, well, because of my religion, I can't get the vaccine? You can ask them, well, what is your religion? You can ask the questions. I've seen, I kind of created a little form for my client to have them fill out where they say, what the religion is, and, giving the employer permission, saying there's a question on there like, well, can I, the employer, contact your leader, whether it's a priest or pastor, rabbi, or whomever your kind of point person is, to kind of verify this information. And maybe it pans out, maybe that is something, but it might not be. But that is something that you want to consider if they're saying, well, I have it's because of my religion that I'm not able to get that vaccine. The standard, you could provide an accommodation, again, being flexible. I think, as Kitty said, it may be something that's kind of the first thing that we want to do because we want to maintain our workforce. The standard, I can tell you that an employer is more so obligated to provide a reasonable accommodation to someone with a disability than they are in a religious reason. That's not to say we don't provide them an accommodation, but if you're saying, well, it's too hard, it's called an undue burden. It's too hard for me to accommodate you the way that you want to be accommodated, or the way that we possibly could do it. It would strain us, and it's really just not feasible. That level of feasible is higher. It has to be really, it has to be significant difficulty for a disability, but for a religious reason, it just has to be more than a minimal cost. So if the cost is more than minimal, you can say, listen, we can't do it. It's too burdensome for the religious. So a little confusing, but I just, again, wanted to throw that out there. That's still a consideration. Again, if it's neither of those two reasons, you can terminate employment, and you can say, listen, then that's not going to work for us. It sounds harsh, but you can do it if it's something that you want to do, and you just simply can't, be flexible. I've been asked about waivers by my employers. I don't recommend them because what does that mean even? So I've been asked, well, can I have my employee sign a waiver that they're not going to sue me, if they're not getting vaccinated, let them in the office, or just something about them not suing the employer for anything because they might contract COVID or something like that, or their family member contracts it. Not recommended, because really you can't waive, going back to the workers' comp thing, if they're injured or they contract COVID because of work, that's workers' comp, and an employee cannot waive certain rights, like the ability to file workers' comp claim. So I don't recommend waivers. I don't think that they're going to be enforceable. You can try it. And again, this is one attorney talking, but I think generally overall it's not going to be something that's enforceable. So,
and then again, coming back to that question about tracing, like how would you even begin to trace where you actually contracted it? I mean, like they may have been at their Uncle Barry's wedding like 3 days ago, and now they come into work and now they say they got it at work. I mean, like how do you realistically say I got this here? Pretty much.
I think that, yeah, that's exactly correct. So I don't really know. And I think it would be hard. And honestly, if they were to try to claim something, and you've asked questions,
right?
Yeah, correct. I mean, they can try, just like,
they
really
try
anything. They will try anything and everything.
And it depends on your state. It depends on your state how supportive or non-supportive of employers they are. The workers' comp laws differ from state to state. Can I ask you in that same genre about for the unvaccinated or even vaccinated? Because now we're seeing a lot of correlation between breakthrough and COVID people that have already been vaccinated that are actually getting it. And are you able as an employer to mandate testing as part of that same genre? And I mean, is that something you could put on the employee as something? Or if I'm unvaccinated and I've made it, I'm not going to mandate that you get vaccinated, but I am going to say, if you're not going to get vaccinated, you have to get tested every week. as a point, as a thing of thing, and you have to pay for it. It's on you, it's not on me. I can do that?
You can now. The issue about payment, so first let me address the first question. Yes, that would be something that if you're going to make vaccination, if you're not taking the mandatory route and you're saying, well, we're encouraging it, but there's an asterisk and you're going to have to get tested in order to come into the workplace, yes, you absolutely can do that. That would be, another kind of, and again, it's about protecting our businesses, right, and our employers. So I think that that's another great option to say, hey, listen, yeah, we're not making it a requirement for vaccinations, but here's what we are doing. We're still enforcing everything that we've been enforcing. And if you're not vaccinated, we're requiring your testing. You absolutely can do that. Now, the pay issue, if you are making it a condition, it's a little gray. And again, I know I want to leave some time for additional questions. If the employer is requiring testing, you as the employer may need to at least pay for the time, if it's during work that they're getting tested, or if it's part of work and it's kind of like almost them getting ready for work is them going to get tested. That starts to talk about the Fair Labor Standards Act and the FLSA, and there are certain requirements. There may be a need that the employer would have to pay for something like that, may need to pay for the test and would need to pay for the time. And I say may and like 1,000 asterisks next to that because it really is fact specific. But again, something to consult with on a case-by-case basis with an employment lawyer.
And now what about requiring, because now at first it was, flatten the curve, and then we got 2 weeks and you wear a mask and then we got to fix it. And now they're saying, now we need a booster. Are we gonna have to then also require then people go get yet a third jab or a second jab or whatever? Is that going to be something that's going to be required as well?
I would say if you're an employer and you're making the vaccine mandatory, that's probably going to be part and parcel of it, is that any additional boosters that may be needed in order to keep it, strong and doing its job, that may be part of your policy. Again, going back to whether, I would say that that's it for right now, because again, there's no law requiring employers to even make vaccines itself mandatory. So from the employment perspective, could I see that? I think that that's more about it making sense, that if you're going to be requiring vaccines of your employees, probably if boosters are being recommended, you may want to follow that route as well. Again, that's just more of a reasonable kind of next step. I don't think it's mandatory. And again, there may be guidance about that when and if that starts to happen. I will say, I think at least the EEOC has been pretty good about keeping their guidance updated. And I don't want to say take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, because I do believe what I'm saying is good for a while. But just note that some of the advice, especially when we're dealing with the things that are not set in stone, very well may change as we get more information.
Would it be a HIPAA? And I'm asking some questions that have been coming along, so we've been kind of interspersing them. Is it a HIPAA violation as an employer to disclose the name of employees who've either tested positive for COVID or are unvaccinated?
So not HIPAA, it wouldn't be a HIPAA violation, but ADA potentially. So it depends on who you're telling it. If you're broadcasting it to your employees.
Yeah, so if I'm saying to all my staff, okay, Joe, Bill, Sue, and Barry have all tested positive and recovered and they're vaccinated. But then there's Rosie and Kitty and Julie that have chosen not to get vaccinated, even though we've suggested it, just to let everybody know. So that would be legal or not legal?
I would say that that is likely not legal under the ADA, because now you're disseminating information about an employee's medical information about an employee to everyone, and there's no reason for that. There's no need, business necessity, right? So
Well, I'm just
could you
saying,
tell
because
their
it's
manager?
not a protected class. So that's where I was asking.
Okay, no, yeah, it's not a protected class, meaning you can discriminate against, you can treat vaccinated individuals differently than unvaccinated, but that's going into the ADA. So that's now medical information that you cannot, as an employer, disseminate. Under the ADA, you have to keep medical information, whether it's their medical condition, their vaccination status, confidential. It doesn't mean that the employer can't ask the question, they can. But now you're talking about disseminating it to people. You can't. I would say that that is not going to be legal. You likely will see some type of complaint. What you could do is, if you're talking about, we need to let the supervisor know that Bill, contracted COVID, or is not vaccinated, so we can make accommodations or things like that. That's okay. On a need to know basis, in order to provide an accommodation or to address a situation based on a business necessity, that's okay. If you're just broadcasting it and you're sending an email to all and you're saying, hey, just as an update, Susan got vaccinated over the weekend. No, you as the employer, Susan can say that for sure. She can let everybody know, but you cannot.
Okay, go. Yeah, continue. Like I said, I'm kind of interspersing questions that are coming up on the chat.
I know we're getting into question time anyway. I really don't have much else other than to say, here are the resources I was talking about. Obviously, the CDC guidance, that's always going to be top, because every other agency is going to kind of follow suit with whatever they're saying. So I would say that you're generally in the good graces of either OSHA or the EEOC, well, really OSHA, with any type of complaints that you're not keeping a safe workplace if you're following the CDC guidelines, which again are kind of updated weekly, probably. So keep that in mind.
All of these are also included in the chat box as well, so you guys can copy those from there as well. So another question that came up, Lindsay, was if somebody gets COVID, it's like I'm working in an office with 4 other people and I got COVID, whether I was vaccinated or not, is it my boss's, as an employer, is it my responsibility to let those that work closely around them that I got COVID so that they could go get tested or take extra precautions on their own? And is that's not gonna put me in any sort of state of liability as well? Or is that something I should just do so that they can protect their own families? Maybe, Rosie has an elderly mother that she cares for, and Rosie's been vaccinated, but she's more likely to be asymptomatic if she was to recapture the virus and could be passing it along to everybody.
So again, I think forgive me, the question
came back to, would it be my responsibility to let the people around that person, if they were all working together, and because it's now happening, that people that have already been vaccinated or not are getting the virus, not necessarily knowing it, and spreading it. Would it be my responsibility as an employer to let the others around them know that Kitty got the virus, she tested positive, so she's going to take the next 10 days off and she's going to be home. So you might want to go get tested so you can protect your own families.
So I would say that the best thing to do is not to say Kitty, but to say someone got, we've discovered that someone has COVID. We believe that, and then contacting individual people and say, we think you might have been in contact with someone who's now tested positive for COVID. We just want to let you know, yes, I do think that that's the responsibility of the employer. I would say do not say the person's name. It may be obvious, and I get it. If you're working in an office with 3 people.
Now all of a sudden Kitty's gone for 2 weeks.
I mean, then, it's not about, hiding it. We're not hiding it, but I would highly recommend to the employer that you don't say the person's name, as obvious as it may be. If there's two people and you're the one telling the other person, don't say their name. Just say that we have reason to believe that you might have been in contact with someone who we found out tested positive for COVID. We're taking all the precautions as far as sanitizing their desk and things like that, and obviously putting them in. Nobody wants to hear that. It's kind of like, are you serious? But I would say yes, that's the responsibility of the employer. Don't say their name.
Okay. If we have staff that work from home, and we have a vaccination mandate for the office, can we also mandate those home workers get vaccinated as well?
So you can. I guess the question would be, were they always kind of home workers?
I mean, yeah, who knows? I mean, but if they may only occasionally come into the office, if they're actually more of a, they're at this point because of spikes there, and they're not going to be around anybody else, but we've made it a mandate. I mean, so in my mind, so if we've made a mandate, it applies to everybody, whether they're working in the office or working from home. There's a question.
Yeah, I mean, there's no law prohibiting it. I think the only question would just be, well, would it be something where you would make it a requirement of them being in the office? Again, if somebody says, the answer is, I don't see any legal reason why you could not do something like that. So yes. I don't know if they may say, well, why do I have to? And I guess the easy answer is just, well, that's what we're requiring of all of our employees. If they're never in the office, again, it's not a legal issue. It just may be like, well, why? But again, you absolutely can do that. So yeah, the answer is yes. You can make that a requirement even of your home workers.
I would say that
if somebody comes back.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
If somebody comes back and says, well, I have a medical condition, it would then make obviously sense for you to say, then the accommodation that we're making from you is you continue to work from home and you just are not permitted in the office if you're not going to get vaccinated. And obviously, since they're already working from home, that shouldn't be an undue burden. You'll just give them that exception. And again, exception, accommodation, kind of the same thing, but only if they fall into one of those two categories of religious beliefs or disability.
I had one other question from a captain, and I might need to address this to your maritime department at Fowler White. If I'm a yacht captain, because there's international laws that apply, and I have a yacht crew member who is not willing to get vaccinated, is this something that we can terminate them for that reason as well? There might be international laws that come into play in that.
Yeah, there may be. I mean, my answer would be yes, you can terminate them, again, unless they would qualify under those two exceptions, the disability or religious belief. But you're right that there may be other issues there that I'm just not aware of because I'm not in international waters as much as my colleagues are.
And if they're not an American, and if they're not an American citizen and they're here on a visa, there might be other things at play there. And Captain, I'll reach out through Rosie Lopez and chat with the Maritime Department and see about finding an answer to that as well, just to give you a full answer from an international perspective. I think I've kind of gotten everybody's questions. And if for those of you that are still, and if there's any other questions, you can either unmute and ask yourself real quickly because we got 3 minutes left, or you can ask me and I can be happy to forward them directly to Lindsay, and we can get back to you. As you can see, Lindsay, do you have your contact information we can put back up here?
Yes, I do. And,
yes.
If you have any questions about making updates to your handbook, that is something I definitely do. And I'm happy to discuss that with you on a one-on-one basis. Same thing about those forms. If you're looking at, well, do you have something like a sample that I can use if my employees are saying, yeah, I have a medical issue. or have religious issue. If you have any of those specific questions, you know, and want to chat, if you're in Florida and you want to chat more about that, or look at what I can do for you just on a general employment business as we're kind of navigating through all of this, I'm more than happy to help. And yes, here's my contact info.
I had one last question. Do we have to, I mean, I would imagine it's yes. In terminating employees is often a multi-step approach. You know, you can't just say one and done. You have to typically go through a process. I mean, do we have to document these types of steps before threatening termination for noncompliance to a vaccination mandate or a mask mandate or any of those types of things?
So I would say, generally speaking, actually, you know, while a lot of businesses and people are used, you know, whether it's the employees or businesses are used to kind of this progressive disciplinary system, it's actually not necessary. Generally speaking, almost in every state, certainly in Florida, you're an at-will employee unless your contract says otherwise. Most employees don't have contracts, and I'm not talking offer letters. I'm talking about a contract that actually, you know, usually a multi-page document. Generally, employees are at will. That means that on the first, you know, you say no vaccination, they don't fall into one of those exceptions, you can terminate right then and there. I would notate somewhere that that's the reason why you let them go, and probably maybe some background information just in case they want to bring some type of claim that you have the documentation. I'm a huge proponent, even if it's an internal memo, it's an email that you're sending to someone, something like that, but you don't actually need to go through a verbal, written, final termination.
Good to know.
Even if your handbook says that we do that, it's not something that you absolutely have to do. And usually handbooks will say, yeah, this is what we usually do, but we reserve the right to let you go just like that.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Well, Lindsay, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. I know you have to get back to court, and I appreciate you squeezing us in to do this fantastic presentation. And you guys, you can also find Lindsay's information on the US Super Yacht Association website, ussuperyacht.com. Lindsay, thank you very much. For those of you that are still here, USSA, Lindsay, you can drop, I know you have to boogie.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. For those of you that are US Super Yacht Association members, we do offer complimentary OSHA 10 maritime training, as well as COVID testing training through Nova Southeastern University. So if you have interest in trying to find out more about those types of things, it is a great program. You can do it online from anywhere in the country. And you can also add some additional background for you in terms of creating a safe workplace. In addition to that, we also, USSA also offers a wide variety of healthcare benefits that if you don't currently offer those things to your employees through T. Spencer Samuels, I know Kelly Spencer was on the call. She's still on here now. You can also find out about that information as well from our US Super Yacht Association website, ussuperyacht.com. We're going to be doing a lot of these, more of these types of programs as they come up. And if you have something or a topic or an issue that you feel important that's going to benefit a lot of other people, let us know. And we'll be happy to pull this out for you. I know we have some marketing things coming up to help you make your business better. We also have opportunities for exposure at the upcoming show for the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show. We will also be in Newport next week for the Newport International Boat Show. We can't do anything without all of you supporting us and the work that we do. We're continuing right now. We're doing stuff in Washington, trying to make it possible for the foreign businesses to come here despite a travel ban. I know that last year during March, we were able to get yacht crew exempted from that travel ban through executive order so that we were able to move yacht crew in and out of the country pretty easily. But we're always looking to try and add additional benefits and support for you as an industry and for you guys that make it so that we can still be here to do the work for you. We so thank you all very much. Rosie Lopez, If you guys ever need any marketing and support from her, she's also out there as well. We're always here for you. Please don't hesitate to reach out, give us a call or send an email. We're always here. And thank you very much, Kitty McGowan, President, US Super Yacht Association, checking out. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Thanks.